Welcome back to another episode of Sexy Marriage Radio. I'm Dr. Corey alongside my wife, Pam,
Always good to be here.
where we're having straightforward, honest conversations. And we're just going to jump right into it today pretty quick, just because there's a lot of ground to cover.
Okay.
When we're talking about just how do we be better? Because we've had a series of the episodes we've been doing lately of coming at some of the different issues that we face in life with our sexuality and our sex lives, like masturbation, that we don't want to just necessarily look at it via the lens of technique or should you or shouldn't you, or, we want to help frame it better so that then people can look at what is it really allowing us to learn about ourselves and our relationship with our sex life.
Okay.
I mean, is that kind of fair to follow up and sum up some of the last couple of episodes you and I have done over the last month?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because what we're trying to actually accomplish is to look at this aspect of our married life and how do we look at it through a lens of growing up? How do we look at it through a lens of enhancing and deepening the connection? Because I think that's what helps. I think that's really what we're all looking for. I don't know. Tell me if I'm off on this, because if I'm off on this, it's going to be a really short show. So there's a lot riding on your answer here, Pam. I'm basing this off of the premise that I don't believe married couples, when they get further into marriage, just want to have the best pleasurable sex there is as far as a physical act.
I believe
they want something a lot more meaningful and deeper and connecting along with the pleasure.
I would say if they're grown up people, that's what they want.
Okay.
But I think there's a lot of people that aren't evaluating their life and their relationship that way.
They don't look at life through the lens of growing up or not, maturing or not, developing.
So I think there's a lot of people who aren't looking for that. I don't know how many of those are listeners to the show.
True.
Maybe some, maybe that's what you come and listen to this podcast for initially. And then hopefully you see the bigger picture.
That's what we're trying to do. I mean, we've done, if you look at the history of Sexy Marriage Radio, we've had a lifelong time of, 13 years, not lifelong, but 13 years of using sex and our sex lives more as a hook to talk about deeper issues. But they're still both important. Our sex lives are still vital and vibrant in our lives. I think they're an important aspect of married life. Absolutely. But it's looking at it as a way to be an entryway or a window into what else is going on, which is for sure where we're going today. And
what else is going on in the relationship and me personally, right?
The above.
How am I viewing things? How am I dealing with life?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All of the above. And so what we want to have happen is more conversation that takes place about this, which has been fun because I've noticed since we made the transition to Circle, which is the new platform which houses the Nation and the Academy. And by the way, there's like one more week or so left of getting the lifetime access to the Academy. That's going to go away because we're pretty well all moved over and migrated now. So we want people to take advantage of that, because in the Academy, there's been some really good dialogues about these last shows of getting into some deeper content and conversation as people are wrestling with it or asking questions and finding support from other members in there, which is the whole point of going through this together. And so you want to find this at smr.fm/academy. That's how you can come join us. And we also want to know what's going on with you and how this is landing. 214-702-9565 is the voicemail line, or feedback@sexymarriageradio.com is how you can email us to give us your thoughts. And let's keep this dialogue going, because I think technique matters, but it's not near as vital as the world would lead us to believe when it comes to our sex lives. And in this episode, particularly oral sex.
I would agree with that.
Right?
Yeah.
That, yes, there's elements of, if you're really bad at it, is it enhancing? But it also is data that's important to know.
Well, so if you're really bad at it, yes. But when you get into the routine, mundane, it's always the same over and over, give me a different technique kind of thing. I think that's important.
But
too.
Where is that born then? Because this is kind of a tease out for what happens with our show today.
Okay.
Is that born in oh, I just was now all of a sudden learned a new technique to try with my tongue or a hand or a body part or add a marital aid, if you will? Or is it learned from a part in me that's born that wants to be more adventurous and erotic and sensual and assertive or present?
Are those mutually exclusive?
I think a lot of times, we'll unpack this in just a second more, but I think a lot of times, if we sum up today's episode, so I'm not using this as a way to let people, okay, move on with your day, have a great day, listen to the whole show, please. But I think a lot of times we want give me the better technique that's going to give me what it is that I'm hoping for, rather than, I think it's more, how do I have this born in me that then brings about the better technique, the desire for more prowess in this aspect of my life. And this will all make sense, I hope, more as we get into it. So coming up today on the regular version is a continuation of this conversation, but we're going to use it through the lens of oral sex and how it's more than just technique that makes it better. And what are some of the aspects and dynamics that are present that we aren't acknowledging or we're blind to, that we need to really bring into the equation to get more grown up, if you will, in this whole aspect of our lives. And on the extended content, which is deeper, longer, and there's no ads, you can subscribe at smr.fm/academy. We're going to talk about, okay, so now that we see what some of these dynamics that maybe we're blind to are, how do we utilize them and incorporate them into our lives as sexual people to actually be better and more engaged and more connected and more intimate during the various sexual aspects that we participate in together with our spouse. So all that's coming up right after this. All right, so we need to set a stage first, because tell me which way you think's best to go with this. We have used, everybody, if you're new to Sexy Marriage Radio, welcome. Glad to see you here. Check us out on YouTube, by the way, because the set's getting closer and closer to being done, if not almost already done now. But it's an element of, if you're new here, my training is under Dr. David Schnarch, is where I've done a ton of training when he was still alive. And he uses the concept called differentiation, which is the psychobabble term for being able to hold on to myself while being in close proximity to somebody else. They happen together simultaneously. Mm-hmm. It's not at the exclusion of one or the other. Differentiation is not individuation, where I am my own person. It's in the context of a relationship always. And we have used the terminology of growing up, right? Of helping us grow up. But I think sometimes for our conversations that are a little more theoretical, like we'll have today, I might need to use the word differentiation more. But I'm curious, because you're the one that's always like, no, don't keep changing words on me, dude, because it's harder to follow because I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Sorry. It took me the longest time to understand what differentiation really meant, but I think it proves the point. Use the word.
Okay, so I have your freedom to
go ahead.
I have the blessing.
Use the word.
I have the blessing. Okay.
Most of our listeners are smarter than me, so they'll be fine using the word differentiation.
Okay. So here's the way, if we look at our lives through the lens of our development, here's how it impacts our sex life, particularly as it pertains to oral sex.
Okay.
Right? Because I think we need to set the stage so that listeners, and I did this, went kind of through this inventory myself on, okay, how well am I with these different aspects? What do I know about me? Where am I missing some things maybe as it pertains to my sex life with you? Right? Because we get the double benefit of presenting this, but also working through it and helping walk alongside other people too, all at the same time. So when we talk about how my ability to handle myself plays out in my sex life, particularly as it comes to oral sex, because this is like the show 2 weeks ago with masturbation, that the word oral sex hits people in a variety of different ways. Like when you know your spouse is really interested in participating in something or having something that's oral, there's a variety of, no, I can't do that. No, good girls don't do that. No, a guy, why would I go down there? You know, all of these different reactions, right?
Yeah, yeah.
because a lot of them
Yeah.
are based on anxiety, ignorance, experience, insecurity,
Questions. What does it
self-worth,
say?
right, identity,
Yeah.
and all of that is what's being exposed here.
Yeah.
And when I can look at it through that lens, the way this thing starts, as far as our conversation goes, to me, is how do I look at my reactions when I think about that aspect of my sex life? Do I even think about it? Or do I immediately get a disgust reaction or a little bit of an aversion reaction or a little bit of a really amped up? "Oh, yes, I'm desperate for that." Because if I can look at it on what does it elicit in me, there's my first entryway into what's the meaning of this.
Yeah. And I mean, do we need to start off with our conversation is not even addressing the trauma side of it? The people who have had abuse in this arena,
Fair,
right? We're not even,
but it still plays a part.
it absolutely plays a part, but I don't think that that's where you're spending a lot of the time on what you're talking about today.
Well,
Is that
maybe this is going to be 75 not and 25 I would. It does apply because there's still an element of my entry into an aspect sets the stage for how I'm going to live with that. And so when it keeps
absolutely?
coming back up in my life, because if I'm in a marriage that one spouse is interested in a vibrant, novel, engaged, variety packed filled, if you will, sex life, this is going to be part of the conversation, most likely, right? I mean, it's going to be something that they might want more than you,
Yeah,
or
it's
you want
likely
more
going to
than
come.
them.
Yeah.
And so, regardless of how you have been introduced into this, it still is an aspect of your sex life.
Mhm.
And so, understanding the trauma or the triggers or the aspects that based on how you were entered into this still is important to wrestle through the meanings associated with that, because is that meaning present now? That's part of our healing.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, particularly when it comes to sexual trauma, our path to healing is oftentimes through the very path that caused the trauma too, not the situation and the power and all of those dynamics, but having a different relationship to this aspect of my life is how I go through a path of starting to heal.
Yeah. That's tough to think about. But
It
yeah,
absolutely is, but it's a lot of people's experiences.
it is for sure.
And so looking at it as a way to, how do I look at this through a lens of meaning, is where I can actually then start to get more intimacy. Because a person that has a stronger sense of self in this, or is more differentiated in this aspect, well, let's juxtapose it, because you got two different sides of this equation, right? A stronger sense of self and a weaker sense of self is just the easiest way to describe it in the theory. So if I have a weaker sense of self when it comes to my sex life, particularly with oral sex, I would want you to initiate it more than me be more bold and ask for or direct what I would like.
Okay.
Because it's more, I just don't want to put myself out there because I'm not as secure. And the reverse is true for a woman, that she would want her partner to initiate it. You know, her husband, I want you to lead this, and I just want to lay back and not really participate. It's like, this is more for you anyway. I know you really do like it. That's more of a weaker sense of self if that's the default.
Okay.
But a stronger sense of self can be, I know that he really does like this, and I like that too. And, so it's all about how I relate myself to that aspect. It's not necessarily what I do or don't do as much as we often think. Does that make sense?
You're making it sound it's like more like an initiation thing. Strong sense of self means I'm someone that initiates, and vice versa.
Okay.
Is that really what we're saying here?
Well, from the outset, yes, because a lot of it, what you talked about earlier, you made a comment earlier of how often this can still just become part of a routine, to where, well, we make out a little bit, we get into the bed, the clothes come off, you go down on me, I go down on you, then we have sex, and then we're done. I mean, that's kind of a normal routine, although you can take out one or two of those steps
Right.
from the
Well,
different
there's
people
probably a
I've
lot
heard.
of people listening saying, wow, I wish I had the you go down on me, I go down on you one, right? Because my guess is the routine doesn't include that for
That's
most
fair,
people.
because it actually turns into the foreplay gets shortened because it's time to move on to the next
Yeah.
thing and then move on.
Yeah.
Right. And so all of that is just looking at it as, I don't mean initiating the act of our sexual encounters in and of itself. I mean initiating within the acts of our sex lives also.
No, I gotcha. Yeah. No,
Because
I'm
how
tracking
else
you
do I
there.
know my presence and my spouse's presence without instigating a couple of things here and there, leading things a couple of different ways here and there? And a lot of times that comes down to, how's my sense of self? Because if we keep getting shot down enough, I'm not bold enough to keep trying.
Okay. So I guess the evaluation comes in then if I'm, I guess, or is what you're saying, look at your sense of self, right? Do you ever want to, your spouse likes something
Look
and
at
you're
how
not?
aware you are throughout the various aspects of your sex life and how engaged you are. Like, where's your mind going during these?
And if I know my mind is wandering and I'm not engaged, what do I do with that?
Right.
That's what I'm asking you, Mr. Therapist.
That's going to be the extended
Dr.
content
Allen.
today.
That's the extended content.
But
because that's the key. I think we got a lot of people that are listening, and because I think it's a normal state of mind of this is just kind of where I am, and I'm not engaged. I'm just walking through the
I think
steps.
that this is the one that I want to kind of really land. Thank you for this. This is the one that I really want to help land. Is I think I'm engaged because I'm focusing on the pleasure, and it does feel really, really good.
My pleasure or their pleasure?
Your own.
Or both? My own.
If oral sex is being performed on you and you are really engaged in the sensations of it and focusing on, I mean, Masters and Johnson actually came up with sensate focus as a way to really kind of turn inward and focus on the feelings that are going on in your body and trying to get the mechanisms lined up that get you up the scale to an orgasmic level. And that's a natural process that,
which sounds amazing.
It absolutely does. But a lot of times that focus on internal pleasure is at the exclusion of who is with you doing these things and participating alongside you or providing these things. And that's one time where a lot of times I think people, when they come into my office and they talk about, I just feel like we're disconnected. And so I'll start asking these kinds of questions. Okay, well, where's your mind go during the different aspects of your sexual encounters? Because Ian Kerner uses the framework of there's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And you can look at it all the way through. You can look at foreplay that way. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and the end. There's a sexual encounter where that's beyond foreplay. That's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you can kind of unpack it all. And what's your mental experience through it all? What's your presence through it all? Because sometimes I can turn inward because I want to just get more in touch and in tune with me. But trying to ask yourself, looking back at those situations, is that at the exclusion for a short term of your spouse and their presence and their engagement? Because I believe a lot of times the exclusion happens because the spouse that's performing said oral sex, their presence isn't there either. They're thinking about technique. Are they liking this? I don't know what I'm doing here. What am I supposed to do next? You know, it's a spectatoring on how am I doing, not who am I in the experience of this. I think those are two drastically different routes.
Yeah, I can see where you're going with this. How do you get past that piece though? Right?
Okay,
I mean,
good question. Because then it starts to get into being more self validated and more aware or attuned to what's going on with you and your spouse. So it's like it's a both and, it's not an either or, right? So it's looking at it into a lens of how do I utilize what's going on with me and really do the work, because I believe what we're going to talk about, the extended content, most of this work is not going to happen initially in the midst of oral sex experiences yet.
fair.
It's
Yeah.
going to come
Yes.
down. It's going to come down to how do I do some revisualization, if you will, or some inventory, if you will, of what's going on with me when I think about these aspects and I look at the way I carry myself and conduct myself. Where is there a reluctance, an insecurity, a disconnect, a discomfort, an anxiety at play? And just try to be honest, have an assessment of where is that, right? Because just to make it kind of real, I can have an element of anxiety that will happen still within the interactions you and I can have sexually that I can then let just run rampant, and then I become passive, or I get caught up in my own head, or history comes into play, or will this last as long as I hope it does, or I hope it doesn't go, all these different things, which that's anxiety based, that's insecurity based. And if I can switch that and have more awareness and then bring you into that, that's the key to switching and using this to become more differentiated, to become more present, more engaged, and have. So if we go on this side of the extreme of insecurity, lack of self-awareness, whatever it might be, I love the word moving into the world of more prowess in our sex lives, in my sex life, of more presence, more engagement, more instigating, but then recovering and following a connection. Because if you talk about some of the best sexual experiences out there, the way Schnarch talks about this is it's follow the connection sex, right? You have a moment of meeting, you have a moment of presence with each other, and you kind of follow that. And that leads where you go next. And it's because you instigate something, and I'm like, yeah, let's go there. And because think about it, how often have we done something out of the norm, if you will, where it's just a subtle shift of let's change it up. And is there a momentary, okay, that's different? Even just a little bit of a, where's this going to go? What's this about? Because we have old maps that are like, no, this is the way we do it. Why are you altering? What are you doing? This is reliable. We know it'll work. And most of the problem with the downfall of most of that is it's reliable for one of us, maybe not both of us.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so this requires each side to really start to examine what's going on with me. And then more importantly, what do I want with me in this aspect of my life? Because those are the deeper, harder questions to answer, because it could be what we talked about before in the last couple of weeks. I don't know. Well, is that an avoiding question or answer to that question? Or is it a truly, I don't know, but do I have the willingness to start seeking out to know?
That's the hope, right?
Well, that's what you're being presented with.
Well, then I'm throwing in the big cherry bomb.
Okay.
At the end of this segment of, do they care? Do they care enough to change? To look at,
to ask that question.
And ask that question.
Right. Because then if we boil it down to, I can't come up with a percentage of clients I've worked with that have come up with this kind of a dynamic on why they're coming to see me for the 23 years I've been doing this now. But the larger percentage of the ones that I've had that are coming to see me for this issue, or the people that email in, a willingness to actually sit with the depth of that question and ask it individually really then shifts what we are really facing, doesn't it?
Sure.
It moves from why won't they ever, or how come they don't? Because if you think about it, if there's a marriage that's got history, you know what your spouse wants. You have an idea.
You have a pretty good idea
That they like this, and they would prefer this, and they would love for you to wear this or lead it this way or approach you this way. And so it's not like it's not lack of information most of the time. Instead, it's lack of want to, lack of care, which that's a deeper issue to have to face. And so,
yeah, I got nothing to say on that. It is a deeper issue to face.
That's the scary one.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we don't want to face that and accept that's what I'm really facing. That's what's really going on in my marriage. And that doesn't mean it's disastrous or hopeless. It just means now we have a more accurate view of what I'm actually facing.
Yeah.
And then I need to figure out, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
Which that's where we're going to head in the extended context.